So, many aedetia pendia dio Achilleus, ulomanen hemuria caeus alge eteken, olas dictimus psuchasavedi proiapsen heroan aut custe veloia telce tunesa. Oia noisi te passi dios te leto gule, ex ut prota diasteten erisante, atreides te vanaxandron, cadios acidas. That's about all my talk. You've gotten the full context of the first 7 lines of the Iliad. Unfortunately, there actually are some Greek extras if you like that. But I was in a summer program for Greek my freshman year. I heard one of our instructors go up before us and say these lines. And go even the extra mile and do this polytonic reconstruction of what the tones might have sounded like originally back at Homer. And in short, I fell in love with these few lines. You know, there's so many quotes that I've loved getting to. There's so many passages, there's so many books of the Iliad that are so enjoyable. But I had to skip over these to start. I didn't know what would feel right, and I didn't know when I would be ready. So, whereas a lot of what I've talked about in this thesis has been sort of the theory work that led me towards certain overarching decisions, what led me towards iambic pentameter, what led me towards line-for-line translation, so one line of English to one line of Greek. Today I wanted to take advantage of a handout that I made a very long time ago and never got to use. Finally do today, and talk about really sort of line-by-line decisions. On the left-hand side, second down, you have Chapman, 1609, 1611, which, for all intents and purposes, is sort of the first time that this comes into English. Achilles' baneful wrath resound, O goddess that imposed infinite sorrows on the Greeks and many brave souls loosed. Now, in the middle, at the bottom, Peter Green, at a very immense age, has recently done a translation that says, "Wrath, goddess, sing of Achilles, Peleus' sons, calamitous wrath, which hit the Achaeans with countless ills." It is fascinating to me how the same text can go in so many different directions. How even within 2 lines there are so many decisions, and how those really set up the character of the full text. So today I'm going to be walking through first a few of those decisions, and then sort of talk about how I find that they are set into place finally. So the first one is the first word in the Greek, mene, rage. And this is a very difficult word to work with. It is used less than 20 times throughout the Iliad. The only character besides a god who ever uses it, who ever holds it as an object, is Achilles himself. So in some sense, the idea of wrath that Chapman originally was using is good, because this invokes the wrath of God. This immediately tells us something that the Greek tells us. Regardless of what you think about what Achilles has done, what Achilles wants, there is some power to his desire, and that, in some sense, does make him right immediately. Now, I have an issue with wrath, though, because to me, even though it is bold, even though it is godly, it's musty. When I pick it up, it doesn't have the same animation that others do. I think Fable's use in 1990 of rage is so beautiful because it is active in several senses. One, rage has this animate fury behind it, but also, if you confuse it for a second, it is a command. No longer is this just an object. Suddenly, this is an implication that you too should have that same fury as Achilles. And that is a very powerful choice. But the issue is one choice leads to another. One small word affects an entire line. Entire lines affect passages, and passages construct our idea of text as a whole. When Fagel says rage, it is a very strong beginning, but to me it fizzles out. That end dash he uses is so long, that motion and that force dissipates. Once you've said just the idea of rage in English, which is not an inflected language, you have to go back and say the full sentence. Subject, goddess, action, sing. object, rage. This is wonderful that you can front load it. The issue is there's a stop at the very beginning of your line. It loses some of the forcefulness that I'm seeking. Now, Fitzgerald has some answers to this. Anger, be now your song, immortal one, a very archaic construction of a command. And in this, I see what he's working with, I see his solution, but I also see his stubbornness. Not only does it sound awkward grammatically, but the flow of the meter, something I'm somewhat brushing over in this presentation, is ruined. Let anger be your song, immortal one, is perfect pentameter. This inversion that he makes for the sake of keeping anger first, to me it unbalances the line. So eventually I had to think, what was I going to choose? And I loved rage. But as much as I understood this impetus towards front-loading, towards focusing on this theme, I had to make a compromise. And so I put it in a different spot, the middle for me just as prominent. My goddess sing of rage, Achilles' rage. Now, there's a lot more to that line. The first thing is, I've left something out that I really wanted to keep, and that is Achilles' father name. Now, the epic, the Iliad, is part of a long epic cycle. And even outside of this long epic cycle, there are so many stories and myths that were before and afterwards, coloring in the context of heroes, singing the songs of glory that are missed. And Peleus has his fair share of achievements. He's a good man, he's a strong man, he's a noble man. And several times in the Iliad proper, when Achilles is asked to do something, he is invoked by his father's name. What's wonderful is that this, in some way, gives a certain flavor that no other word can use. It gives a history in the flash of the mention of his name, but only if you know him. If I could just do a quick survey, how many of you have heard well of the hero Peleus? So a few of the classicists. That's the problem. See, if I were to stop and give you a 2-page footnote immediately saying every quality that Peleus has, and sort of jamming all of that knowledge into that word through paratext, and then shoving it onto the first line, you would think, I understand the context of this line. But I can't do that. You don't know who Peleus is in the first instance. So there are other compromises. I could say Prince Achilles, because in the most general sense, Peleus is a ruler. Achilles is the son of a ruler. He is noble by virtue of that birth. A mere mention of some name gives you an idea this is an important name, this is an important son. But at that point it was so watered down that other things had to have space for it. So after I think about 43 versions, this was the one I settled on. Now, I said that I would keep largely within the first line, but there's one other word that I think is really, really difficult and really, really fun to think about. And that is ulomene. It comes from the Greek word olem, to destroy. And what is so beautiful about this is that Greek has, in addition to active and passive meanings, something called the middle voice. I had to learn what it was in a day, and that was too little time, so don't worry too much. But basically, it has some additional features, but also can work in both directions. Towards the self, maybe, back in one direction, and reflexively. And that is what is so brilliant about this ambiguity. When we are saying that Achilles' rage is destructive, we are saying that it is destructive in both directions. It is destructive to Agamemnon, who he is first fought with here. It is destructive to all of his fellow soldiers, who he will curse in pursuing him. And it is destructive to himself, in that through the pursuit of all these things, he is, to his own knowledge, throwing away his life. How do you encapsulate that so quickly? And how do you do so when that's not even the full intricacy of it? What's beautiful in the Greek with this first rage word is that the line itself is a picture of the text. Many rage. Oedetia peleiadio Achilleos. Achilles and his rage surround the first line as they will the poem. But what ulomene reminds us is that outside of this circle is destruction. that surrounding and going back to Achilles is destruction, that bursting this literal bubble is destruction. It's this wonderful pivot that doesn't seem to work well with just an adjective. If any of you are familiar with a large amount of translations of the Iliad, I assume the same people who said they knew who Peleus was, you will know that Lattimore in 1951 is famous for being so literal, which is why it is fascinating to me to see how he deviates. Sing, goddess, the anger of Peleus' son Achilles and its devastation. A noun, a substantive thing, not an adjective. Allowing the line still to flow through this first idea of the rage, positioning, as I do, that rage into the middle of the line, but allowing a slight twitch, a slight new understanding of the concept to move forward. What I love about the Iliad is the freedom of choice. I read about a lot of people who, when they sit down to translate something, shut out every other possibility of what they read. I'm the complete opposite. I've read 27 different translations of the Iliad in the time that I worked on this thesis. All of them were very fun in their own right. The 17th century is a little bit dry. But what's so fascinating to me is you get to see connections not only from the poet in the 9th century all the way to our time, but from authors to authors. Fitzgerald having this idea of bringing anger to the front, Fagles liking that, nodding, agreeing. Fitzgerald also taking this middle voice idea of Ilium and saying, I will translate it twice. Doomed and ruinous, he says, at the top of the right side. Both how it affects others and how it affects me. Going back over now and getting to have the luxury of having the lines there and read them, I get to appreciate these subtleties. I get to think about what was going on in my head, why things felt right. But I realized also that when I was reading, I wasn't going word by word, line for line, and thinking, how does this connect to everything else? At a certain point, I was just listening and I was just hearing, trying to figure out if it was right. And so, as I have, about 40 seconds then, I wanted to take that time to read my own translation after a long period of time. My goddess, sing of rage, Achilles' rage, that doom which racked Achaeans hard with pains and sent such valiant souls to Hades' crypt, left heroes' bodies, corpses, spoil for hounds, and feast for birds as Zeus's will ordained. Revive them for us, one more fool than king, and one more god than man. Sing, goddess, sing.